Hello and welcome to the course Learn how to play chess from scratch. In this lecture I will tell you what this course is about and what you will learn. This course is about chess. It is designed for people who want to learn how to play chess but don't know the rules. If you know the rules but feel yourself unconfident when playing chess because there was something unclear for you, you may also pass this course. In this course, I start from the very beginning. There are 6 sections. All sections are devoted to different components of playing chess. The first section is Introduction to the course. In this second section, I introduce you to a few facts from chess history, and I also explain how to set up the board and how to use notation to record or pronounce moves. The third section is devoted to how to move and capture. In this section I explain how to move and capture with your pieces and pawns in all details. I believe after you pass this section you will be able to play a chess game. At least you will be able to move correctly. The fourth section is about special moves and rules in chess. And I also explain what check, checkmate and stalemate are. I teach you what to do after you promote a pawn and how to make a castle correctly. But the cornerstone of all beginners is capturing en passant. Even club players sometimes forget about this move. I believe you will refer to the lecture number 16 many times. That's why I try to provide you with a clearer explanation of this rule. The fifth section is devoted to methods of checkmating. I teach you the simplest ways to checkmate, how to checkmate with 2 rooks, with the only queen and with the only rook. And in the last section, I demonstrate you a game between 2 grandmasters. I comment every move and explain why grandmasters made these moves, what the idea was. So it will be easier for you to apply same principles during your game. This game also includes a very nice tactical combination. I'm sure you like it. Thank you for your interest. Let's start to learn. Welcome to the course Learn how to play chess from scratch. This lecture is devoted to what you will be able to do after passing this course. As I already mentioned before, this course is for beginners. I teach you the rules and how to move with your pieces and pawns. After passing this course, you will be able to do such things as record your game using chess notation, move and capture with your pieces and pawns correctly, know basic and specific rules of chess, know what to do to win a game or to end a game in a draw. Learn at least 3 different ways to checkmate your opponent. And know basic principles how to play the opening. So you will be able to make pieces interact with each other, what gives you a lot of opportunities. I also prepared quizzes for you, so you can check yourself. This is your first step into chess. If you would like to become a real club chess player, you may continue learning chess with the help of my courses. Thank you for your attention. This is a special lecture of the course, and I'm going to tell you what chess gives to people. In other words, what benefits of chess are. Chess is a game for people of all ages. You can learn to play at any age, and in chess, unlike in many other sports, you don't ever have to retire. Age is also not a factor when you are looking for an opponent. Young people can play with old, and old can play with young. Now let's speak about what chess develops. Chess develops memory. The chess theory is complicated, and many players memorize different opening variations. You will also learn to recognize various patterns and remember deep variations. Chess improves concentration. You may know that during the game you are focused on only one main goal, to checkmate and become the winner. Chess develops logical thinking. Chess requires some understanding of logical strategy. For example, you will know that it's important to bring your pieces out into the game at the beginning, to keep your king safe at all times, not to make big weaknesses in your position, and of course, not to blunder your pieces away for free. Chess promotes imagination and creativity. It encourages you to be inventive. There are a lot of beautiful combinations that you can construct yourself. Chess teaches independence. During the game, you are forced to make important decisions influenced only by your own judgment. Chess develops the capability to predict and foresee consequences of actions. There are a lot of things you have to predict during your daily life, but I always compare chess to trading in financial markets, when your task is to take a decision and then to prepare plans of what you can do if different market scenarios realize. Chess inspires self-motivation. It encourages the search of the best move, the best plan, and the most beautiful continuation. Chess is also important for your psychological condition. Chess is a test of patience, nerves, willpower, and concentration. It enhances your ability to interact with other people. It tests your sportsmanship in a competitive environment. And the last benefit is that chess is fun. It's not just another one of those board games. No chess game ever repeats itself, which means you create more and more new ideas each game. It never gets boring. You always have so much to look forward to. Every game you alone decide the destiny of your pieces. You can sacrifice them, trade them, pin them, fork them, lose them, defend them, or order them to break through any barriers and surround the enemy king. So you've got the power. Hello and welcome to my course, Learn how to play chess from scratch. In this lecture I would like you to know a few facts regarding chess history, and I will also introduce you to the chessboard. Chess was invented long ago. The names we use for the pieces date from the Middle Ages. In those days, kingdoms were ruled by kings and queens. They lived in the castles and had bishops to advise them. They also had brave knights to defend them. Even the peasants helped to defend the kingdom. From the same time, chess was developed as a game as we know it today. Of course, certain changes have occurred since then, such as the squares have been made of different colors, and the pieces' moves evolved. This is a chessboard. It has alternating light and dark squares. All chessboards have the same pattern of light and dark squares. There are 64 squares organized into 8 lines per 8 squares in each one on the chessboard. A basic rule is that you must set up a chessboard in a particular way when you start to play. Each player must have a light square in the lower right corner. Remember, light on the right. This is what is necessary to know about chess history and the board. And in the next lecture I'm going to introduce you to chess notation. Hello and welcome back to the course Learn how to play chess from scratch. And this lecture will be devoted to chess notation. All new players should learn to keep score using what is called algebraic notation. In this diagram you will notice that the board includes the numbers from 1 to 8 along the left edge and the letters from A to H along the bottom of the board. We can use the combination of one letter and one number to describe each square on the board. The square in the bottom left-hand corner is called A1. And now I will introduce you to how to read and write chess moves. The important thing to remember is how to identify the pieces you are moving. You just need to use a single capital letter. K for king, Q for queen, R for rook, B for bishop, N for knight. And note that P is not used. Chess players have agreed that a move without a letter, such as E4, for example, is understood to be a pawn move. You are almost ready to start using chess notation. Just pay attention to the following symbols. X means take or capture, plus means check, hash or double plus is a checkmate. OO is castle's king side. If it's triple O, it's castle's queen side. Exclamation mark means good move. Question mark is a bad move. Double question mark, it's a blunder. Let's put into practice what we've just learned. We will use the famous scholar's mate. For example, the white king begins the game on E1. The black rooks begin the game on A8 and H8. If I begin the game by pushing the pawn in front of the king 2 squares, we can describe this move as E4, E5. Moving the knight on G1 to F3 will be written as knight to F3. But I would play bishop to C4, H6, queen H5, knight F6, blunder, queen takes on F7, and X is used to show that the capture has taken place. And it doesn't matter whatever was on F7. And for mate, many players use hash or number sign. Remember, it's a good idea to record your games so that you can learn from your mistakes when you look at them later. I have just shown you how to record the game, but how to move with your pieces will be explained later in the course. Hello and welcome back to the course, and now I will tell you about files, ranks and diagonals. Files are the rows of squares that run up and down the chessboard. Ranks are rows of squares that run across the chessboard. Diagonals are the rows of squares that run at a slant of the chessboard. Now let's discuss some simple rules regarding the chessman. Chessmen, pieces and pawns, can do either of two things. They can move to vacant empty squares, or they can capture enemy chessmen. Note that the only piece that can never be captured is the king. When an enemy chessman is taken, the piece or pawn that captures it takes its place on the board. The chessmen are your army and that of your opponent. Each side has 16 men, 8 pieces and 8 pawns. And the first rule of chess is that white moves first. In the next lecture I will tell you how chessmen move exactly. Welcome back to the course, and today we will discuss how to move with your pieces and pawns. At the start of the game, white's pawns stand on the 2nd rank, and black's stand on the 7th rank, as it is shown here. Each side has 8 pawns. This is their starting position. How the pawn moves and captures. A pawn can move straight ahead 1 or 2 squares on its first move. After that, it can move only 1 square at a time, even if it didn't go 2 squares on the first move. Let me show you an example. e4. The pawn moved 2 squares. e6. e5. Now this pawn moves only 1 square. The pawn is like a foot soldier in a war. It marches forward 1 square at a time, unlike the other pieces, and the pawn can never retreat. Pawns that have not yet moved have the option of beginning their forward journey with a double move 2 squares forward. And the pawns may not jump over other pieces or pawns. The pawn captures differently from the way it moves. The pawn captures diagonally 1 square ahead, as if it were fighting on its side with a short sword. In this diagram, the white pawn can move to any of the squares marked with X. By contrast, the black pawn, having already moved, has the only one option. In this diagram, the white pawn can move straight ahead, or else capture the black knight or the black bishop. Meanwhile, the black pawn is about to move to the end of the board. When a pawn reaches the last rank, it becomes another piece. In most situations, it will become a queen. You may not leave it as a pawn, and you may not promote it into a king. As a result of pawn promotion, it is possible to have many queens on the board at the same time, or other chosen pieces. We assign a value to each chessman using the pawn as the lowest unit. There is no chess rule concerning this, but it will make it easier to play a game if you have some idea of the relative value of the chessman, particularly when you need to make a decision regarding exchanging one of your men for one of your opponents. So the pawn equals to 1. Pawns cannot jump over the pawns or pieces. If blocked, a pawn can't move straight ahead until the other pawn or piece gets out of the way. In this diagram, pawns block each other and cannot move. But in this diagram, the pawn can capture the rook on the left or the knight on the right. The bishop, however, is immune from capture, as the pawn may only capture diagonally. This is how pawns move and capture, and in the next lecture I will explain you how to move with the most complicated piece. And now let's talk how to move with the knight. Each side has 2 knights. This is their starting position. White's knights are on b1 and g1, while black's stays on b8 and g8. In this diagram, knight may land on any square that has an X. The knight moves in an L shape, 2 squares forward and 1 to the side, or 2 squares sideways and 1 forward, or 2 squares backwards and 1 to the side. The knight may jump over friendly and enemy pieces without having any effect on the man it passes over, like this. The knight captures any enemy piece or pawn it lands on. Knight takes on f7. The knight equals to 3 pawns. I hope everything is clear for you and now you can make successful move with your knight. Hello and welcome back to the course, and now let's speak about bishops. Each side has 2 bishops. This is their starting position. In this diagram, the bishop may land on any square that has an arrowhead. The bishop moves diagonally at a slant, stopping at any empty square according to choice. The bishop may capture any enemy piece or pawns in its path. Bishop takes on g7. we assign the bishop a notional value just as we did for the knight. The bishop also equals to 3 pawns. As you may see, the bishop is more simple in use than the knight. Welcome back to the course. This lecture is devoted to how to move with your rook. Each side has 2 rooks. This is their starting position. White rook stands on a1 and h1, and black rook stands on a8 and h8. In this diagram, the rook may land on any square that has an arrowhead. The rook moves horizontally and vertically in straight lines, stopping at any empty square according to the player's choice. The rook may capture any enemy piece or pawn in its path. Rook takes on g5. The rook equals to 5 pawns. That is more expensive than the knight or the bishop. For example, if you trade your knight or bishop for a rook, you have 2 pawns advantage, which is called the exchange. So you will have an extra exchange. Hello and welcome back to the course Learn how to play chess from scratch. And in this lecture I will tell you about the strongest piece, the queen. Each side has 1 queen. This is its starting position of queens. Queen d1 and queen d8. In this diagram, the queen may land on any square that has an arrowhead. The queen moves horizontally, vertically, and diagonally, stopping at any empty square according to choice. Another way to look at this is to say that the queen combines the power of the rook and bishop. The queen can capture any enemy piece or pawn on its path. Queen takes on b3. Note that at the start of each game the queen stands on a square of your own color. Black queen on black square, white queen on white square. A notional value for the queen is 9 pawns, so it is more expensive than the rook plus bishop. In this lecture I am going to explain you how the most important piece moves, the king. Each side has 1 king. This is their starting position. White king stands on e1, black king stands on e8. In this diagram, the king may land on any square that has an arrowhead. The king moves only 1 square in any direction, horizontally, vertically, or diagonally. The king may capture any enemy piece or pawn in its path. It is against the rules to move the king onto a square where it can be captured, like e5 in this position. If you do this by accident, we say that the move is illegal. The illegal move must be taken back and a legal move must be played instead. There must always be at least 1 square between kings. Whenever the king is attacked, we say that he is in check. For example, black king is in check. The rules require that the king gets out of the check on the very next move, like this. Since the king is not allowed to be captured, it is an infinitely valuable piece. And we can't give it a notional value. I believe now you've learned how to move with your pieces. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask them inside the course. Hello and welcome back to my course, Learn how to play chess from scratch. Now you know how to move your pieces and pawns, and it's time to learn about such situations as check, checkmate, and stalemate. In this diagram, the white king is attacked by the black bishop. An attack on the king has a special name, it is called check. When the king is under attack, we say that the king is in check. When the king is in check, it must be saved immediately. The king can never be captured or exchanged for another piece. If the king cannot be saved, the game is over. If your king is in a check, you cannot make any other move until you deal with the check right away. There are three ways to answer a check. The first one is to move the king to a safe square to escape. In this case, the king could move to f1 or e2. The next one is to capture the attacking piece. It is called to remove the attacker. Queen takes bishop. And the third way to answer a check is to place another man in the line of fire, like knight d2, to block the check. As all the legal ways of answering the check are available in this diagram, white may choose the method he thinks is best. As for my opinion, king e2 is the best one. Let's now talk about checkmate. Checkmate, usually it is shortened to mate, is a game position in chess in which a player's king is in check and there is no way to remove the threat, like in this position. Checkmating the opponent wins the game. For example, what we can see in this position. Rook attacks white king. There is no available squares for this king, because e-file is under black's queen control. White can't also remove the attacker. He can't take this piece. And he also can't block the check. So he can't move any of the pieces to e1 to prevent this checkmate. Now the game is over, black won. Now let's talk about stalemate. If the king is not in check, but cannot move without moving into check, and the player cannot move any other piece or pawn, then it's a stalemate. This is regarded as a draw, in spite of any material difference between the two sides. In this position, it is black's turn to move, but his only piece cannot make a legal move. It's a stalemate. Let's look at the position. King can't move to h7 or g7 because there is white queen on the 7th rank. He also can't move to g8 because of the bishop on b3. It's a stalemate. Okay, we know almost all the rules. As soon as we cover a few more important points, we will look at a real game. Welcome back to the course, and let me tell you about castling. Once the battle commences, the kings need a safe home. The rules allow for a special move that safeguards the king. This is called castling. There are strict rules regarding when and how castling may take place. First, I will illustrate the castling maneuver. When the king's castle is the only time in the chess game that two pieces may move at the same time. It is also the only time that the king can move more than one square at a time. It is also the only time a rook may jump over another piece. This is position before castling. And this one after castling king's side. King moves two squares and rook jumps over king. And now I will show you how to castle queen side. Again, king moves two squares to the left side and the rook jumps over it. There are a number of rules that must be observed concerning castling. The first one. Being in check stops you castling. You cannot castle if you're in check. You must get out of check first, then you may be able to castle later on. The king cannot cross a square controlled by an enemy man in order to castle. The king cannot move onto a square controlled by an enemy man when castling. You cannot castle if there are pieces between the king and the rook. The king and the rook to be used in castling must not have moved early in the game. In this diagram you can see a number of these possibilities. White king cannot castle on the king side, since that would place his king in the check from the queen on g6. But he may castle on the queen side, since the king does not move across a check, even though the rook on a1 crosses a square which is attacked by the black queen. Beginners are often confused and think that you may not castle if you have ever been in check. This is quite wrong. As long as you have not moved your king, it does not matter how many times you have been in check early in the game. Hello and welcome back to the course, and in this lecture I will explain what it means to promote a pawn. Sometimes it is called queening. When a pawn reaches the last rank, it can become any piece other than a king. It cannot remain as a pawn, but must take on a new role. It can become queen, rook, bishop or knight. You can have a new queen even though you still have the original queen on the board. And you can continue this process if you succeed in promoting more pawns. In this diagram, white pawn was at b7, about to queen at b8. And now you see that the pawn has been promoted. The pawn has advanced and white has chosen a new queen, which replaces the pawn. We call it queening, since nearly always a player will change the promoted pawn into a new queen, because the queen is the most powerful piece. You may legally have many queens, or indeed other pieces, but I don't recommend you to have more than 2 queens because of the risk to make an accident stalemate. Thank you for your attention. Hello and welcome back to my course Learn how to play chess from scratch. And in this lecture I will teach the most tricky rule, en passant. En passant is a French term meaning in passing. It is black's move in this diagram. He has the option of advancing the pawn 1 square or 2, as the pawn has not yet moved. It is reasonable to assume that if black moves the pawn 2 squares, he will avoid capture. However, white may capture it anyway. The en passant rule allows white to capture the pawn as if it had only moved 1 square ahead. This means that whether black's pawn moves 1 square or 2, it can be captured by white on the very same square. It is a requirement of the rules that the en passant capture, if used, must be carried out right away. It cannot be deferred, or the right to play it is forfeited. This is en passant maneuver. White removes the black pawn from d5 and places his own pawn on d6. Making the en passant capture is not obligatory. And please note that only pawns can capture en passant, and only a pawn on a neighboring file can capture in this way. Thank you for your attention. You may refer to this lecture later to remind this rule. Welcome back to the course, and this lecture will be devoted to how to make a draw. There are 5 ways to end a game in a draw: perpetual check, stalemate, insufficient material, draw by agreement, and 3 times position repetition. Let's start with perpetual check. If player is unable to escape from annoying checks at each consecutive move, even though he has far more men than the opponent, then it's a draw. We call this perpetual check. Let's see this action in the diagram. The white queen wouldn't normally be able to cope with all the black forces, but this is an exceptional case. White draws easily by repeating this process. Queen g5 check, king has to go to h8, queen f6 check, king g8, queen g5, king h8 and queen f6. Black is powerless to avoid this perpetual check as his king is exposed and his pieces cannot prevent the check. The next is stalemate. If the king is not in check but cannot move without moving into a check, and the player cannot move any other piece or pawn, then it's a stalemate. Here is an example. It's black to move, and black king is unable to move, and it's stalemate. Pawn on h6 controls g7 square, king on h5 controls g6 square, and rook on a8 controls g8 and h8 squares. So black king has no squares to move. The stalemate is considered to be a draw. The next is insufficient material. It is also a draw if neither player has enough men to checkmate the opponent, as it is shown here in the diagram. A king and bishop cannot deliver checkmate without the help of other forces. Another draw is by agreement. If both players say it is a draw, then it's a draw, like you may see in this position. Neither white nor black has ideas how to win this game. Finally, if the exact same position is reached 3 times in one chess game, a draw can be claimed. The exact same position does not have to happen 3 times in a row. However, it must be the same player's turn to move. This rarely arises. And now let me show you what is 3-time repetition. In this position, black has a queen for one minor piece. So now black has material advantage. But white can play bishop b4, attacking the queen, and the only safe square is on b6. Then white plays bishop c5, attacking the queen again. Queen a5, bishop b4, queen b6, bishop c5, queen a5, bishop b4, and the position was repeated 3 times. If, for example, black decides to move to c7 and to sacrifice his queen for the rook, then this position will be better for white because of an extra pawn and better pieces development. That's why black wouldn't agree to play queen c7. So he has only to play queen b6 and to repeat the position. And white can claim a draw. Hello and welcome back to the course. In this lecture you will learn how to checkmate using 2 rooks. 2 rooks are able to checkmate bare king, making a line mate. One of the rooks cuts the king off the file or rank, the other gives a check. If king comes closer, both rooks move to the opposite side of the board. Let me show you. Rook b6, king c5, attacking the rook. Rook h6, king b5, rook g7. We moved our rook to the opposite side. King c5, rook g5 check, king d4, rook h4 check, king e3, rook g3 check, king f2, attacking the rook, rook a3, king g2, rook b4. Again, both rooks move to the opposite side. King f2, rook b2 check, king e1, rook a1. It's a checkmate. Black king can't move to the second rank because of the rook there. Welcome back to the course. This lecture is devoted how to checkmate with the queen. Queen and king are able to checkmate a bare king by 2 different methods. The simple method. Queen is put at the distance of the L letter move, knight's move, and it chases the king away to edge of the board. As soon as the king stands at the edge of the board, the queen immediately cut it off the line. Then white king approaches the black one, and the queen, with the help of its king, checkmates. Let me show you. Queen b6, king e5, queen c6, king d4, queen b5, queen repeats king's moves, king e4, queen c5, king f4, queen d5, king g4, queen e5, king h4, and now queen g7, king is cut off, king h5, king b7, king h4, king c6, king h5, king d5, king h4, king e4, king h5, king f4, king h4, and queen g4, checkmate. Or you can play queen h7, or queen h8, or queen h6, doesn't matter. And now I would like to show you first method. White king and queen together shoulder the enemy to the edge of the board and give a checkmate. King b7, king d4, king c6, king e4, queen g3, king d4, queen f4, king d3, king c5, king c3, queen e3 check, king c2, king c4, king b2, queen d2 check, king b1, king b3, king a1, and queen c1 checkmate. I believe now you can checkmate a bare king with the only queen. Thank you for your attention. And now I will tell you how to checkmate with the only rook. King and rook checkmate bare king in two ways. Let me show you the simple way first. Rook cuts off the king and white king forces the black one to stand in front of it at the distance of one square. It is called an opposition. Then rook gives a check, edging it out to the next line. This process is repeated until the end of the board. So let's start. Rook c8, king d4, king b7, king d3, king b6, king d4, king b5, king d3, king b4, king d2, king b3, king d3, rook d8, check. King has to move to e file, king e4, king c4, king e5, rook d1, king d3, king c5, king e7, king c6, king e6, rook e1 check. Now king moves to f file, king f6, king d6, king f5, rook e8, king f4, king d5, king f3, king d4, king f2, king d3, king f1, king d2, king f2, rook f8 check, king g3, king e3, king g4, rook f1, king g5, king e4, king g6, king e5, king g7, king e6, king g8, king e7, king g7, rook g1 check. King has to move to the edge of the board, king h6, king f6, king h7, rook g2, king h8, king f7, king h7, rook h2, checkmate. And there is also a faster way. White king and rook consistently cut off parts of the board black king can move, leaving it with smaller rectangles. Rook c8, king d6, king b7, king d5, rook c6, leaving the king with the only square. d1, d5, h5, h1, king d4, king b6, king d5, king b5, king d4, rook c5, king d3, rook c4, king e3, king c5, king d3, king d5, king e3, rook d4, king f3, rook e4, king g3, king e5, king f3, king f5, king f2, king f4, king g2, rook e2 check, king f1, king f3, king g1, king g3, king f1, rook e3, king g1, rook e1, checkmate. I think now you are able to checkmate Bear King with the rook. Thank you for your attention. Hello and welcome back to the course Learn how to play chess from scratch, and today I want to share some basic principles with you. You should try to follow them to get a better position and win the game after that. The first basic principle is annexation of the center by pawns or pieces. It means that you should try to occupy the center. The second one is minor pieces development. You should develop your knights and bishop from their starting positions. The third one is hiding the king. You should make a castle to be sure that your king is safe. And now, as an example of following these basic principles, I would like to show you the game between two grandmasters, Edward Lasker and George Thomas. The game starts with d4 move, one of the strongest first moves. White grabs central squares e5 and c5 with his pawn and opens the way for his dark squared bishop and queen. f5. This move is not the most popular. Black takes central e4 square under control, but didn't open the way for his pieces. Knight f3. According to the second principle, White developed his knight. e6. Black controls central squares d5 and f5, opening the way to his bishop on f8 and to his queen. Knight c3. The other knight is developed. The object of White is to advance e2 to e4, providing control over the center and opening the way for f1 bishop and queen. Knight f6. Black develops his knight and prevents White to move his pawn to e4. Bishop g5, a typical move. White pins knight by his bishop and prepares to play e4. Black knight is unable to move, because queen will be attacked. Bishop e7. Black defended from the pin and he also prevents a pawn from advance to e4. Now White controls e4 square with the only knight, but Black with his knight and pawn. Bishop takes knight. This is a logical move. The value of the bishop and the knight is approximately the same, 3 pawns. Trading Black knight, White destroys the defender of e4 square. Bishop takes bishop. Of course, Black takes with his piece. If he takes with the pawn, g takes on f6, Black will get double pawn structure, what is disadvantages. And he can't hide his king on the king side, because there will be no secure pawn cover. So he takes with the bishop. e4. Finally, White reached his goal. F takes on e4, the correct exchange. Black trades his king-bishop pawn for central pawn. When we play the opening, the closer a pawn to a center, the stronger it is. Knight takes on e4. Now the central pawn is destroyed, but the knight took its place. It controls more squares and even attacked the bishop on f6. Castle kingside. Black hit his king and developed his rook to open a file, what is usually beneficial. Bishop d3. Strong move. White developed his bishop to the active position. Bishop controls e4 square, protecting the knight and looking at the king's pawn cover, especially at h7 pawn. Now, if white somehow develops his queen to h5, he will threaten to checkmate. b6. Black plans to develop his light square bishop to b7, from where it will control the main diagonal. Such a development is called fianchetto. Knight to e5. White minor pieces totally annexed the center. Moreover, knight opens the way to the queen. Bishop b7. Bishop is developed, but now white involves his queen for attack. Queen h5. White attack is so strong that he doesn't have to spend time for castling. Queen, bishop, and two knights create serious threats. One of them is knight takes on f6, queen takes on f6, and queen h7, checkmate. Queen e7. Black defended his h7 pawn indirectly. If white takes bishop on f6, then after g takes on f6, h7 pawn will be protected by the queen. But this move loses in a forced way. He had to destroy one of the threatening knights, like bishop takes on e5. Although, after d takes on e5, the attack is not stopped. So queen e7 was played. At its famous position, white controls a lot of squares. Moreover, queen, bishop, and two knights are threatening black king's position. It allows white to force a fantastic combination. Queen takes on h7, check. White sacrifices his queen to decoy black king under attack of other white pieces. Black has to take the queen. King takes queen, knight takes on f6, double check. One of the strongest kinds of a check is a double check. It is a check of the knight and the bishop. The only way to escape from such a check is to move with the king. King h6. King has to move and face his death. Of course, black wants to hide the king in the castle, like king h8, but it would lead to an immediate checkmate by two knights. Knight g6. This is a checkmate. So he played king to h6 in the game. Knight e to g4 check. The more pieces are in attack, the stronger it is. King gets into the trap. King g5. h4 check. Now pawns join the battle. King f4. g3 check. King f3. Bishop e2 check. King g2. Rook h2 check. All white pieces participated in attack on the king, and now the end is coming. King g1. King d2 is a checkmate. It was also possible to checkmate using castle queenside. Very nice game. And I hope you've learned these three basic principles. Let me repeat them again. The first one is annexation of the center by pawns or pieces. The second one is minor pieces development. And the third one is hiding the king. Thank you for your attention.